So I started my career as a financial analyst at one of the big four accounting firms in the corporate finance department and specifically in the M&A team. In this video, I'm going to go over what a day in my life looked like. I started on the graduate program and I didn't have any M&A experience before I started. As I've said before on my channel, there are various different types of financial analyst positions. The day in the life which I'm going to cover in this video is just based on my experience working in M&A at the big four. So let's start off by looking at how the M&A department is structured and what type of work you can get as an analyst. There are two different types of teams really. One is regional and the other is a sector team. For regional, as the name suggests, these are teams that are based in specific geographies. So you might be looking at Scotland, for example, and you would have an M&A team in either Edinburgh or Glasgow, most likely. You could have a M&A team in Birmingham, you could have a M&A team in Manchester, Bristol, etc. So these teams in these regions will focus on transactions of companies which are based in those locations. So you might have a company which is headquartered in Birmingham, for example, and so the local Birmingham team of the Big Four will execute that transaction. The sector teams, on the other hand, as the name suggests, they're responsible for working with companies in particular industries. So you can have sector teams such as TMT, real estate, energy, life sciences and healthcare, consumer. So there can be several different sector teams and they'll work with companies in that sector, as I said, and they bring really valuable sector insight. And so that's what clients expect, and that's why these teams exist. They will know the sector inside out and they'll know the players in the sector, the potential buyers of a company. Let's say it's a sell-side transaction that you're working in. So they have deep sector knowledge, and these sector teams are specialists in executing transactions in that specific industry. So the work you're given as an analyst can normally fall into three different buckets, and that's working on a live engagement, working on a pitch, so that's working towards winning a live engagement, and then the final one is business development, or BD as it's known for short. So going through these stage by stage, the first one, business development. So this is when the firm is trying to understand whether a company needs M&A services. So this is when they're talking with CEOs, CFOs, the shareholders of the company, to try and understand what their vision is for the business, whether they want to grow the business into a new market, whether they want to start supplying a new product or service. They might be looking to divest a non-core asset, for example. So this is where they are trying to understand what the plans are for that business. And naturally, the next conversation will come onto what services that we as a firm could offer them when it came to M&A. So the next stage is the pitch stage. At that stage, you know that the company is interested in making a potential transaction and they'll ask you to pitch. So what that means is you'll be asked to prepare a presentation where you will discuss several things. You will try and demonstrate why you are the best team. So you won't be the only team, or you won't be the only firm that they've asked to pitch. They will ask several other firms, and that could include the other Big Four, it could include boutique investment banks. And so they'll ask several of these M&A practices, M&A teams to pitch for that work. And so the presentation that you're preparing will cover why you think you're the best team. It'll go through creds or credentials of transactions that you've advised on. You will also consider what the valuation of the asset could be. So if that's a sell-side transaction that you're pitching for, you will look at the potential valuation or what your client or potential client will be getting for that business that they're hoping to sell. You will also look at potential buyers for that business. Again, that's using the example of a sell side. So there are several sort of items that will be covered in this pitch document, and then there will be a sort of face-to-face presentation of that document. And so this is quite a rigorous exercise that the team needs to go through, and eventually you pitch for so much work that you understand the process. But at the start there's quite a lot to learn. I mean, that's across all the different buckets of work. But as an analyst, when you start, there's quite a lot to sort of get your head around in terms of pitching and what's required in a pitch. So that's the sort of second stage, that's pitching for the work. So as I said, first stage, business development, you're having a conversation with the company, understanding what their plans are. Second stage is that they ask you to pitch and you're trying to win the work. And then if you're successful, you get onto the third stage, which is the live engagement, the live deal. This is when they hire you as an advisor, as an M&A advisor. And so this can be on sell-side deals, which is, again, as I said, selling a subsidiary for them, selling the entire company for shareholders, for example. Then it could also be a buy-side role where you're helping the company to acquire another asset, another business, for example. As you can imagine, there are a variety of different tasks during a live deal, and I won't go into that in this video, but as an analyst, you'll be given a lot of different tasks as part of these deals. So just before we look into what I'd get up to in a day, I just wanted to say that the cliche of every day being different was certainly true for me as well. However, I think this is a good indication of what I'd get up to in the day as an analyst. So in the mornings, I normally start off by 9 a.m. Now, that's just an average. I'd sometimes come in sort of 15 minutes early, sometimes in 15 minutes late. My team was pretty relaxed in terms of when people came in, generally when there wasn't a meeting naturally. So I know some people in my team strolled in at 9:15, 9:20. If people started walking in at 10 a.m., I think there might have been a few words, but generally, 9:15, 9:20, if people walked in, they were fine. And especially if they'd been working late the night before, I think people were quite understanding about people walking in a few minutes late. So the first thing that I'd do was to look at my to-do list, which was on my notebook. That list would have been carried forward from the previous week if it was the start of the week, if it was a Monday, or it would have been carried forward from the day before. So you have a look at the to-do list and start to think about which are the items which are a higher priority. And so you start going down the list, and the higher priority items obviously get worked on first. So you look at your to-do list and start to prioritize things, have a look at your emails naturally as well. That will generally tend to impact what is high priority and what isn't. So after you've looked at your to-do list and gone through your emails, you might have a few items that you need to respond to immediately. So those ones I would take action on. I would try and get those off my to-do list as quickly as possible. Some naturally will take longer, and so you might leave them for later on in the afternoon, again depending on how urgent they are. So after I've looked through my to-do list and looked through my emails, I will start working on either a piece of work which I've stopped the night before and just continue to work on that, or start a new task. And again, I think a large amount of people don't get all the items completed on their to-do list. Normally there's quite a few items which just need to be rolled forward from the previous night. Again, I might get new tasks given to me by my manager in the morning, and sometimes I might have to prioritize those over the other ones and just put those others on the back burner and just focus on this new task. Again, it all depends on when the deadline is for these tasks, and that's again determined by what the client wants and when we might have a meeting or when we might have a submission where it might be an internal submission, so a partner might be reviewing a document, for example, or it might be an external sort of submission or an external deadline where we might be sending some marketing documents to a client for review. The only day where I'd have a different start to the morning would be Monday, and that's when we had a catch-up meeting with the entire team. During that meeting, we'd discuss what projects were on, what the progress on each of the projects was like, whether there were any deadlines coming up, were there any challenges, specific challenges on a project, and we'd get the input of all the different team members together. We would also go through resourcing for that week, so everyone would give an indication of what they were planning to spend their week doing. They were also asked to say whether they had any free time. Naturally, if they did, they'd be given more work on live engagements or BD work, for example. And so it was just a general catch-up within the team, and that normally lasted an hour. And it was useful to get an understanding at a high level of where the team was. One BD task I'd get on a regular basis, and I'd spend plenty of mornings working on this task, would be to create a one-page profile for a company. Now, what a one-page profile is simply one slide of a PowerPoint presentation in which you're explaining what the company does and covering certain details about the company. So you'll be covering what products and services that the company offers, key facts about the company such as where the company is based, how many employees does it have, when was it founded, who the owners of the business are. So these high-level facts which are important to know. You'll also be looking at the financials of the business, what the revenue has been, what the EBITDA has been for the last 3 or 5 years. And you'll also be looking at any recent news for the company. So whether they've moved into a new geography, whether they've started a new factory, whether they've been involved in any M&A, for example. And so all this information together provides a snapshot of the company. And this one-page document is used by senior figures, so partners, directors in the firm, when they're going for BD meetings, so that they can get clued up about a business very quickly. And so they might be going to meet that company specifically, or they might be going to meet a competitor of theirs, and they might discuss potential acquisition ideas, for example, of which this company that you've created a one-page document for might be one. So it's a very common task for an analyst to do. When I first started, I'd take 5 hours, 6 hours maybe to create one of these documents, because it would take a bit of time to understand where you'd get all the information from. Naturally, once you start doing them on a regular basis, you do them much more efficiently, and so eventually you can get one of these done in a couple of hours, no problem at all. One more thing to add in terms of where the information is coming from is based on publicly available information. So there'll be a lot of information coming from the company website itself. There'll also be a lot of information coming from the statutory accounts, which you can find on Companies House, for example, in the UK. And a lot of M&A firms also have access to specialist financial software, such as Bloomberg or S&P Cap IQ, where you can get a lot of information about companies very quickly. So let's say I worked on a one-page profile for a company in the morning, and I started that off at around 9:30 after I finished my emails and my to-do list, as I said, and get that to my manager at around 11:30, 12 o'clock. My manager would then review the document, review the presentation, and the aim is to make sure that you minimize the amount of review comments that the manager has, which means that you haven't made too many mistakes or have covered all the information that's required in that one-page profile. Naturally, when you first start out as an analyst, you'll have plenty of review comments, but that's nothing to get worried about. Eventually, you do start to understand what's required, and you should see the review comments reducing in number. So by the time the one-page profile is finished, it's normally lunchtime. And now whether I have my lunch at my desk or whether I had it with my friends would really depend on how much work there was on. If it was really busy and there was a lot to get done, I'd normally just get a meal deal from the closest shop and have it at my desk. So after 5 minutes, I've finished my lunch and I've started cracking on with more tasks. And if I wasn't busy and there wasn't too much to do in the afternoon, I'd spend a full hour eating lunch with my friends. And that happened quite a few times during my first year as an analyst especially. And so maybe every 2 days in the week on average, I'd be able to take the full hour for lunch. So after lunch was done, I might have worked on a live engagement such as sell-side engagement. And so I could do a task such as working on an information memorandum document or an IM, which is just a sales document for the company or subsidiary which we're helping to sell. The general purpose of the document is to market the business, and so the document will contain a lot of information about the business and will try and paint the business in the best light. So it'll have information such as what the company does, what products and services it offers, where it's based, who their customers are. There's a lot of information on the management, for example. And so your responsibility, or the team's responsibility, is to create this document and, as I said, paint the business in the best light so that a buyer would be interested in acquiring that business. So in the afternoon, it might be the case that the client sends over particular information which is required to create a page in the IM document. So for example, they might send some information regarding customers, which I'd then have to analyze to see different trends, to understand customer concentration, and really provide some analysis of what the customer makeup of this business looks like. The information from the client would generally come in Excel, and so that's where I'd do my analysis, and I'd be using pivot tables and creating charts from the data and then pasting those into the PowerPoint presentation, which is what's used for the IM document. And so all analysts need to be competent in PowerPoint and in Excel, and I talked about it before in the video I made about the skills you need as a financial analyst, and I'll link it up here so you can watch that after this one ends. Naturally, you use Excel and PowerPoint so much that you gradually get better at using those tools but 2 points of advice that I can give you is, firstly, understand the functionality of these tools, because they are incredibly powerful tools, and so they'll allow you to create great output very quickly, but you need to understand how they actually operate. The second piece of advice is to learn the shortcuts for these applications, because it can save you a lot of time, and being efficient as an analyst without compromising on quality is really a superpower. Aside from the financial analysis that I do on the customer data, I'd also do some writing for the document, and so this is where your skill of business writing comes into play. When you first start as an analyst, I'd encourage you to read the reports that your team has previously done, so that you can understand what business writing looks like and you can start implementing that style of writing. Again, when analyzing the data or creating the IM document, you want to try and minimize the amount of review comments that your manager has on your piece of work. Again, as I said previously, you're likely to have more review comments when you first start off. Gradually, as you start to gain experience, your output will naturally improve, and so you should get fewer review comments. What I've found is generally, especially at the start, people are okay with you making mistakes, but it only starts to become a problem when you start to repeat these mistakes. When doing any of these tasks, you might be against a deadline, and so that can add to the pressure of the work. These might be internal deadlines, so for example, a partner might be wanting to review these marketing documents such as the IM, and so you need to be able to complete the document and get it to a standard where a partner is happy to review it. Or it might be an external deadline, so for example, you might be handing these marketing documents to a client, for example, or you might be sending out an IM to potential buyers, and so these deadlines will push you to get the work done in a certain time frame. Another activity that I might have been involved in was to go to a meeting with a partner or a director, and that could be a meeting for a project or even BD. In the meetings, as an analyst, you're clearly not expected to lead the meetings, but your role there is to act as a note taker. You'll be taking notes of what were the main points from that meeting, whether there was any market intel shared, whether there were any actions coming out of it for the team to follow up on. And so these meeting notes are important because they act as a reference point as to what was said in the meeting. I was invited to many meetings as a first-year analyst, and all these meetings didn't take place in a formal boardroom, but some of these meetings were also at coffee shops with a much more relaxed atmosphere, but we still talked about work most of the time. Gradually, as you start to go to more of these meetings, you get an understanding of the structure of these meetings, and you can start to slowly contribute to these meetings as well. In a project meeting, you can prepare to run the client through a piece of analysis that you've done, and it's a great way to start building confidence so that you can increase your contribution in these types of meetings. At 4 or 5, I might have had to start working on a pitch that was coming up in a few weeks. As I said previously, there's plenty of things that are covered in this pitch. So that's looking at the market and what the current trends are, looking at potential buyers for a company if it's a sell-side pitch, and plenty more other areas. You can work on a number of different tasks when creating this pitch. So you could be working on formatting the document, you could be looking for potential buyers of a company, or you could be working on the valuation itself, looking at precedent transactions, for example. And so there's plenty to get on with as an analyst when it comes to working on a pitch. If I wasn't working on a pitch, I might get some comments back from my manager regarding the IM that I previously provided him in the afternoon. And so I'd have to process these changes or process the suggested changes that he'd give to me. And so that could take a few hours at least. Or a client might send me an email asking me a particular question or requesting a particular document or a piece of analysis, and so I'd have to create that, or I'd have to work on that in the evening. Overall, you can see that there's plenty going on, creating slide decks for BD meetings, managing a live engagement. You're also working on a pitch simultaneously, and so this is where the late nights come in. There's a lot to do and the deadlines are short, and so you might have to put in a few all-nighters. Whether I'd do a late night in the office really depended on how fast the project needed to progress and when the deadline for the task was. Putting late nights aside, working as an M&A analyst is a great way to understand how businesses operate and how markets work. As an analyst, you've generally come out of university with very little idea of how businesses actually run, and working as an analyst in M&A, you get an understanding of how commercial and strategic decisions are made, and you'll start to develop valuable skills which you'll use throughout your career. I hope this day in the life was insightful, and if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. If you want to hear about whether some of the myths of working at the Big Four are true or not, click on the video on your screen right now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.